Hello everyone and welcome to Green Healing. Let's talk about abuse. I want to give a brief introduction to my types of abuse series that I'll be doing throughout several weeks and months ahead, along with other alternative and natural healing things, of course. So we've looked at the types of abusers. Now we need to look at the types of abuse, and there are many. The subject of abuse is typically more challenging to many people, more challenging to me, because when you live it, it's something that's more difficult to talk about than just types of abusers or the healing that you're doing for most people, and it's normal. And that's probably because it can be more triggering for some of us, cause more emotional flashbacks. So it's possible that while we're visiting the types of abuse, and while I'm sharing some of not only my knowledge but my personal experience, it's possible that some of you might experience emotional flashbacks or triggers in regards to what we'll be discussing. The reason I'll be mentioning some details of what I lived personally is because I want to provide as much information as possible for you to be able to relate to it, for you to be able to be like, aha, this is a clear-cut example, it's similar to what I lived, or that's exactly what I lived, so that you can formulate an idea in your mind of what types of abuse you actually lived if you've lived abuse, which are things that I found pretty helpful when talking with other people. So I want to be able to give back to others just as much as people were able to give to me through the sharing of their personal experiences. So today I'm just going to give general thoughts on abuse and the list of the types of abuse that I want to look at. So what exactly is abuse? What encompasses abuse? So first off, abuse is immoral. We looked at natural law and morality versus immorality before the types of abusers. So abuse harms other beings, therefore it's not moral. Immoral. It is a pattern of behavior done for the purpose and through conscious intention to have control over someone else. Each form of abuse obviously has its little nuances. Sometimes they entwine with each other, and abuse can be done in a more overtly way, very obvious, and sometimes more covertly way. And when it's covert, especially if we've been with a covert narcissist or with a more covert type of psychopath or sociopath, sometimes it can be very challenging to figure out exactly if or how they've abused us, because they know just how to maintain enough subtlety to get us questioning ourselves and questioning whether it really is abuse or not. And it often happens that it is abuse. Sometimes an abuse can be a one-time occurrence, and sometimes some people aren't even, they don't realize that they're abusive, or they don't mean to be abusive. A moral person might end up being abusive without realizing it and then be super remorseful for the one-off in their entire life, and that can happen to anyone. But an abuser who wants to control or harm someone else, even usually in a relationship, it'll be repeatedly abusive. But sometimes in a more like a colleague type of relationship, or if the person doesn't know the other person well enough, sometimes what happens is they pinpoint the right moment to target their victim, and they do just the one abuse thing to get the exact result that they want at the exact precise moment that they want. It's so subtle, you don't see it. It's the one time, but it was so calculated. And that's why sometimes it's just so tricky just to figure it out, When the abuse is repeated over time, usually it escalates. It starts more subtle, it starts gradually, and then it becomes super intense. Near the end of the relationship that I was in, I could tell at the beginning there were so subtle things. I didn't even know that he was abusing me from the start of the relationship until I was analyzing the whole relationship years later. But by the end of the relationship, it was really intense, and he was allowing himself to cross certain lines that I wouldn't normally let him cross, which is, well, what led me to leave him, obviously. But it was really intense. It was all the time, and it had become, he was being very covert about it for a long period of time, but at the end he was very overt about it. It was very obvious. Typically, the abuser wants power and control over the victim. Sometimes the imbalance of power between aggressor and victim is obvious, abuser and victim, and sometimes it's very subtle. Sometimes it's so subtle that the victim thinks that they're being treated fairly, like I thought for a time. And sometimes we use our own power when the abuser allows us to have a bit of power to do exactly what the abuser wants us to do. That's how twisted and backwards it can be sometimes. Let's make something clear. Abuse is never, I repeat, never the victim's fault. Abusers target us. Different abusers look for different things in different people. For their targets, different types of abusers, they're looking for different traits in people. And it's never our fault, never your fault that you so happen to have these traits that depict you as the perfect target for said person or said other person. It's very tricky to figure out what they're looking for. But I believe that it starts with knowledge. And I believe that we can set clear boundaries, healthy boundaries, and figure out how to become non-targets, how to become the types of people that abusers look at and be like, no. And when we are more aware, abusers hopefully won't want to target us. That's what I'm hoping to become, a non-target. I don't have all the answers, and obviously I'm not a substitute for a trained therapist, but hopefully with sharing the knowledge that I have, it'll help some of you become aware of the types of abuse you've lived, and hopefully together we can go on this journey so that we can figure out a way so that we're not targeted by abusers, so that abusers look at us and be like, no, and so that other people can be informed of what abusers are maybe potentially looking for and become aware of that. But sometimes it's just impossible to know. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong lipstick or something, and then the abuser like, that person, it's just so tricky to really know what they're looking for, what they want. How do we protect ourselves? I believe personally that it starts with knowledge. So what are the specific types of abuse that I'm going to be looking at, researching and looking at and giving examples from what I experienced? Some of the types of abuse I didn't experience, so I will have less examples of that, but I will try to bring as much knowledge, as much research knowledge as I can from those types of abuse that I have less personal experience in. So on my list, I have physical abuse, medical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, psychological abuse, spiritual and religious abuse, ritualistic abuse, financial abuse, neglect, narcissistic abuse, which kind of encompasses a lot of different types of abuse, bullying, brainwash, and mind control. If there are other types of abuse that you would like me to touch on and research and share with you, my knowledge, my insight on what I can find on it, just let me know, and I'll add that to the list. I'm also planning to make videos about the mind detox meditation therapy that I did a few years ago that helped a lot, that helped reduce a lot of the CPTSD symptoms. And I'm going to make more videos about EFT in the future. And I do plan on going into some of the natural remedies that I use frequently and that I have used to help me along. So I will be switching back and forth abuse and healing. That's not all super serious abuse stuff. Anyway, I have a hard time being super serious. So I'm going to go through this providing the knowledge that I have, the research that I've done, sharing a bit of the experience that I've lived. So I hope you liked this episode of Green Healing. And again, let me know if there are other types of abuse you'd like me to add to my list, and I'll do that. And remember, empower yourself and be emotionally free.